When the phone rang that Tuesday evening, I was kneeling in the garden, deadheading roses the way I always did when I needed peace. Madison's name lit up the screen, and for one foolish heartbeat, I felt the same old joy that used to rush through me whenever my daughter called. Back when we still spoke every day, back when I was still her safe place. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice flat, mechanical, stripped of warmth. "Hello, sweetheart," I answered, steadying myself against the ache in my chest. "How are you? I'm calling to let you know Trevor and I got married yesterday. It was a small ceremony, just immediate family and our closest friends." For a moment I couldn't breathe. Married. Yesterday. I thought the wedding was planned for October. We had talked about it in passing, though never in detail, because Trevor always seemed to be handling everything. "Yesterday I finally managed, but I thought you were having a wedding in the fall. We decided to do something more intimate." Trevor felt like a big wedding was too much pressure, too commercial. "We found a beautiful venue on Martha's Vineyard and kept it simple." Her words tumbled out quickly, like she was reciting from a brochure not describing the happiest day of her life. "Congratulations," I whispered, swallowing the splinter of grief. "I'm sure it was beautiful." "It was perfect," she said brightly. Trevor's parents were there. His sister flew in from California. My friend Jessica was my maid of honor. Tom was Trevor's best man. The photographer got some amazing shots. I let her list names, none of which were mine. Not her mother, not the woman who had raised her alone since Robert walked out when she was 8. "That sounds lovely, Madison," I said. "I'm happy for you." There was a pause, a slight hesitation, and then the real reason for the call slid out. "Oh, and Mom, Trevor and I were wondering if you could send us the keys to the beach house. We're thinking of spending our honeymoon there since we didn't have time to plan a proper trip." The words hit harder than the wedding news. My beach house. Our beach house. The one place that had been ours for 15 years, where Madison learned to swim, where she once ran barefoot across the sand with fairy lights in her hair, swearing she would marry there someday. "The keys to the beach house," I repeated, letting the silence stretch. "Right," she said quickly. "Trevor's really excited to see it. I've told him so much about it over the years. He's particularly interested in the renovations you've done and the property value appreciation." "Property value appreciation? How romantic." "Madison," I asked quietly, "when you say you got married yesterday, do you mean you had a ceremony, or do you mean you're legally married?" "Both," she replied. "We got the license last week and had the ceremony yesterday. Why?" "Just clarifying," I said. My hands trembled, though my voice did not. "And you didn't think to invite your mother to your wedding?" There was a sigh. "Mom, please don't make this dramatic. It was Trevor's decision to keep it small, and honestly, after everything we talked about regarding boundaries, I thought you'd understand." Understand? Oh, I understood perfectly. I understood that Trevor had finally succeeded in his plan to isolate Madison from the one person who might protect her. I understood that my daughter had been convinced that excluding her own mother was healthy. And I understood with bone-deep certainty that Trevor Morrison had no idea what kind of woman he was underestimating. "So you'll send the keys?" she asked, her voice bright again, as if nothing had broken. "We're hoping to drive up this Friday." "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I'll make sure you get them." When I hung up, I sat motionless in the garden, my shears forgotten in the dirt. Trevor had patterns. I had pieced them together in secret: the wealthy girlfriends, the isolation tactics, the debts. Madison wasn't his first, and unless I intervened, she wouldn't be his last. He thought I was another weak mother who would roll over when cut out of her daughter's life. He was wrong. I spent the next 3 days making phone calls, digging through old records, and pulling threads that led back further than even I expected. Trevor wasn't just a manipulator. He came from a line of them. His grandfather had once swindled Robert, my ex-husband, stealing millions in a deal gone wrong, a betrayal that had helped destroy my marriage and leave Madison fatherless. Now Trevor had married my daughter, unknowingly tying himself to the very bloodline his family had once robbed. And with that, I knew exactly what kind of wedding gift I would deliver. On Friday morning, I drove to their apartment. I placed a neatly wrapped package at the door, silver paper, and a white bow hiding the weight of everything inside. Documents, bank records, clippings, proof of the past and the present. And at the top, a note in my own steady handwriting: "Congratulations on your marriage. Every new husband should know about his wife's family history. With love, Carol." Then I walked away. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Madison's number, but Trevor's voice shrill and enraged. What the hell is wrong with you, you crazy old witch? How dare you send us this garbage? I set down my teacup gently. Hello, Trevor. I take it you opened your wedding gift. This isn't funny, this is harassment. I'm calling the police. I'm confused, dear, I said calmly. What exactly would you report that your mother-in-law gave you public records as a wedding present? I could hear Madison crying in the background, asking questions Trevor refused to answer. I smiled faintly. Trevor had underestimated me. He thought he'd married into money. He hadn't realized he'd married into memory, into vengeance, into truth. And truth, once unwrapped, cannot be returned. Trevor kept calling me names like he was trying to slice me into silence. When insults didn't work, he shifted to charm, then to pity, then back to rage, every key on his little piano of control. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the counter, letting him play while I washed the same teacup over and over until the water ran cold. I'm 56, a mother who worked 2 jobs through Madison's childhood and learned long ago that storms burn themselves out when you don't feed them oxygen. Madison, I said, ignoring him, speaking to the silence I heard straining in the background. Sweetheart, are you safe? There was a pause, a shudder in the air, then her small voice. I don't know. Trevor snatched the phone back so hard I could hear his nails scrape plastic. She's fine. And you're finished. Keys. Beach house. Today. Of course, I said evenly. They're already in the mail. He hung up with a growl, but I didn't flinch. The keys were indeed in the mail addressed to Trevor, tracked, insured, and wrapped with a pretty blue ribbon. Only they didn't open what he thought they would. Not the locks, not the doors, not the story. I had changed those 3 days ago when the call came through. It's amazing how quickly a locksmith can rewrite a home's history when you hand him a police report from 25 years ago and a newspaper clipping with the name Morrison circled in red. That night, as the wind rattled the eaves, I spread the documents I'd gifted them across my kitchen table and reread each page until the names began to march like a drumline. Harold Morrison. Trevor's grandfather had been the charming pillar of a coastal church board and a visionary developer who convinced my then-husband Robert to invest in a marina project that collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide. The money evaporated. Our marriage did too, eaten by resentment we mistook for hunger. Buried in the clippings was a quote from Harold I'd underlined years ago. We're all building toward the future. He had been building an exit. Robert had been building a grudge. I had been building a home for a daughter who watched her father's chair go empty. In the manila folder I delivered to Madison lay more recent stones in the same wall. Trevor's Phantom LLCs, his consulting fees, the pattern of girlfriends whose savings dipped just before he dipped out. There was even a photograph, grainy but cruelly clear, of Trevor at a courthouse steps, with a woman I recognized only from a Facebook message she'd sent me warning me with a kindness my pride had deleted at the time. Tell your daughter to keep her accounts in her own name, Mrs. Parker. He smiles when he lies. I set the paper down and looked at our beach house keyring, the old bronze seashell charm worn smooth by summers. That house had saved us after Robert left. It had given Madison back a sky big enough for her grief. She learned tide tables like prayers and talked to gulls as if they answered. On nights we couldn't sleep, we'd sit on the porch and name the constellations we didn't know, inventing their stories so the dark wouldn't swallow ours. Around midnight my phone chimed. Madison. A text, then another, then a flood. Did you do this to hurt me? Why didn't you tell me about Grandpa's deal with Dad? Trevor says you forged these. Mom, answer me. I called instead of replying. She picked up on the first ring, voice trembling. He says you're jealous, she blurted. He says you never liked him because he isn't Dad. I didn't like him, I said quietly, because the first time he shook my hand, he looked over my shoulder at the mantel to see what you were worth. Silence. Then a wet sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. I keep thinking about my vows, she whispered. The word honor. I thought it meant endure. Maybe it means see clearly. It means both, I said. But you don't have to honor a lie. She inhaled sharply, and then the line went muffled as if a hand had covered the phone. Trevor's voice came from far away, too close to her. Hang up. Now. Madison. I said, my voice low and urgent. Listen to me. If you want space drive to the beach house, I'll meet you there tomorrow, midday. The keys will work for you. The keys? There was a tiny beat of hinge catching. How, she asked. Because I made them that way. She exhaled and I heard the sound of a bag zipper. If he asks, say you're going to the ocean to breathe. She hung up. I sat in the dark with the phone cooling in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope thin as transparency, tough as nylon. At dawn, fog dragged its ghost palms along the highway as I drove east. I stopped at the bakery in town, where the old man still mispronounces my name, and added 2 cinnamon rolls to the coffee I didn't need. A gull screamed above the dunes like a warning and a benediction. When I turned into the sandy lane, the house rose up pale and sure against the sky, the new locks glinting like quiet teeth. Madison's car was already there, backed into the drive the way I taught her when she was 16, so she could get out fast if she ever needed to. She was sitting on the porch steps, knees to her chest, wedding band catching a small mean sun. For a moment she was 8 again, a seashell crown crooked on her head, asking if the tide ever stops. It goes out, I told her softly, setting the bakery box between us. And then it comes back. She took a roll and didn't eat it, turning it in her hands like a decision. He said you wanted to ruin our honeymoon. I want to ruin a pattern, I said. One that started before you were born. She looked up, eyes salt bright. Is it true about his grandfather and dad? Yes, I said. But I didn't send the file to punish you. I sent it to introduce Trevor to our family history. He owes us more than an invitation. He owes us the truth. She laughed without mirth. He doesn't think he owes anyone anything. Then he'll learn from someone who does. A car engine hummed at the top of the lane. Madison stiffened, and I felt the old animal of motherhood rise in me, hackles up. Trevor's rental gleamed like a promise no one intended to keep. He stepped out wearing sunglasses and that smile that never warmed his eyes. He held up the envelope I'd posted like a hunter displaying a snare. Cute, he called. New locks, old tricks. Breakfast I offered because my mother raised me to be gracious in every battle I planned to win. He came closer, slow measuring fences and windows, like a thief cataloging alarms. Here's how this is going to work, he said, toe planting in the sand with each word. We're going to use the house this weekend. After that, we can discuss future arrangements. Madison's hand found mine. Trevor, she said, voice small but steady. This is my mother's home, not yours. He tilted his head like she'd spoken bad grammar. It will be ours, he replied. Community property is a beautiful thing. I held his gaze steady as tide. Only if you build the community first. He smirked and dug into his pocket. I brought a wedding gift, too. He held up a familiar brass seashell charm dangling from a blank ring. Found this in the mailbox. I smiled. Keep it. Souvenirs are cheaper than settlements. Something mean flashed in his eyes. You think you're clever because you sent your little file? He murmured, close enough now that I could see the pulse in his neck. But you didn't include everything. There's more about your ex than you want Madison to read. I felt the old wound stir. Then bring it, I said. All of it. We're not afraid of the whole story. Madison's grip tightened. The waves hissed and curled as if leaning in. Trevor looked from me to her, calculating, then smiled like a blade sliding back into its sheath. See you soon, he said, and turned toward his car. He would be back. Men like him always circle when they smell the end. But the beach house had seen storms I thought would snap it in two. It kept standing. So would we. And the next time he returned, he would find the tide higher than he remembered, and a mother who finally learned how to fight in water. Madison and I stayed on the porch long after Trevor's car disappeared down the sandy lane. The silence was heavy, filled with the sound of waves hitting shore in a steady rhythm that felt more like warning than comfort. She picked at the cinnamon roll until flakes of sugar clung to her wedding band, then brushed her hand against her jeans as though trying to erase the ring itself. Mom, she whispered, what if he's right? What if there are things about Dad I don't know? What if you're hiding just like Frank did from you? Her words sliced me open. But she deserved truth, not half answers. There are things about your father, I admitted. Not secrets meant to hurt you, but truths that were too heavy for a child. He made mistakes, Madison. He trusted the wrong people, and those choices destroyed our marriage. But I never once hid them from you to protect him. I did it to protect you. She turned her head slowly, eyes glassy. And now I'm the one who married the wrong person. I reached for her hand. No, you married the wrong pattern, and patterns can be broken. She looked out to sea as if searching for proof. I don't know if I'm strong enough. I tightened my grip. You don't have to be yet, that's why I'm here. That night, she stayed in the guest room, the room where she once taped glow-in-the-dark stars to the ceiling as a teenager. I listened to her muffled sobs through the wall, each one twisting my chest until I thought my ribs might crack. I wanted to march into her room, hold her like when she was 8, promise to fix everything. But I also knew she needed space to see the truth without me pushing her toward it. Just after midnight, headlights swept across the walls. I rose quietly and peered through the curtain. Trevor's car was parked at the end of the drive, engine idling. He didn't move. He just sat there, the glow of a cigarette tip flaring in the dark, watching, waiting. I dialed the sheriff's office, speaking in low tones. They knew me here. Small towns remember every storm you survive. By the time a cruiser rolled past 20 minutes later, Trevor was gone. But the chill in my bones lingered long after the taillights disappeared. The next morning, Madison came down with her suitcase. He knows where I am, she said simply. He texted me last night, said he'll wait until I come to my senses. She swallowed hard. That doesn't sound like love, does it? No, sweetheart, I said gently. That sounds like ownership. She sat heavily at the table, staring at the untouched cinnamon roll. I used to think marriage meant safety, but I feel less safe with him than I do here with locks on every door. Safety, I said, pouring her coffee, isn't given, it's built. Later that day, Victor, my lawyer and longtime friend, drove down from the city. He carried a new folder thicker than the one I'd gifted them. I dug deeper into Trevor's history, he said grimly. You were right, Carol. He's repeating his grandfather's crimes in a modern way. Shell companies, real estate scams, luxury debt piled onto women who thought they were building futures with him. Madison's face drained of color. That's my husband. No, Victor corrected. That's a man you married. But a husband is something else. A husband is supposed to stand beside you, not behind your back with a ledger in his hand. Madison closed her eyes and whispered, I can't breathe. Victor placed the file gently in front of her. Then let the truth breathe for you. She opened it with trembling fingers, scanning page after page until she reached a bank statement with her own name listed beside Trevor's. Her breath caught. He's already moved money, she whispered. From my account. Without asking, I pulled her into my arms as her body shook. This is the moment, Madison. I whispered into her hair. The moment you choose, if this pattern ends with you or continues until it swallows you whole. That evening, as the sun bled into the sea, we made our decision. Madison would stay at the beach house while Victor filed for a restraining order and began annulment proceedings. She cried when she signed the first document, but when she set the pen down, there was a new steadiness in her eyes. This isn't just about ending a marriage, she said quietly. This is about ending the grip his family has had on ours for decades. I nodded, pride swelling like the tide. Exactly. But even as the papers were filed, Trevor didn't retreat. He left voicemails dripping with false promises, texts that swung between begging and threats. He sent flowers that wilted on the porch steps before Madison touched them. And one night, he left a note taped to the new locks. You can't erase me. We're tied forever. I burned it in the fireplace while Madison watched, her face lit by the flames. No, I said firmly, we're not tied. We're tested, and we've already survived worse. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. For the first time in weeks, I felt her breathing steady with mine. Still in the quiet hours when the waves grew restless, I knew Trevor wasn't finished. Men like him rarely bow out gracefully. They wait circling until they think the storm has passed. And I also knew this when he came back, we would not be the same women he had left behind. Days passed at the beach house like waves, some crashing, some gentle, but always carrying the sound of change. Madison began to find a rhythm without Trevor's shadow. She cooked breakfast with me, walked barefoot along the tide line, even laughed once, a raw, shaky laugh that made my throat tighten. But every small step toward freedom seemed to stir Trevor more. The messages escalated. First came apologies, grand sweeping ones that read like movie scripts. Then anger. You'll regret this. Then threats wrapped as love. No one else will ever put up with you. Come back before it's too late. One evening, while we were folding laundry on the porch, Madison's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, and her face strained. "Mom," she whispered, "he's here." I looked up. Headlights crawled down the sandy lane, Trevor's car dust curling like smoke around its tires. "Inside," I told her firmly. She obeyed, clutching the basket like a shield. I stayed on the porch, hands braced on the railing as Trevor stepped out. He wore that same smile, thin, polished hollow. "Carol," he said smoothly, as though arriving for Sunday dinner. "You've made this very difficult." "Good," I answered. "Difficult makes you show your true face." He tilted his head, studying me. "You've poisoned her against me." "No," I said, steady. "You did that yourself the moment you put your hands on her bank account and your lies on her vows." His smile cracked, just a flicker, before he plastered it back on. "She's my wife. You can't undo that." "Marriage," I said, "is more than paperwork. It's trust. And you shredded that before the ink dried." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you've won, but you haven't shown her everything. Does she know how her father lost everything? How you stood by while my grandfather took him apart?" The words were knives, but I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said. "She knows now. And the difference between you and me, Trevor, is that I don't hide the truth from my daughter." He froze, startled by the strength in my voice. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. Behind me, the screen door creaked. Madison stepped out, pale but determined. "Trevor," she said, her voice trembling, but clear. I read everything. "The files, the statements, all of it. You can't twist this anymore." He turned to her, softening instantly. "Baby, listen, your mom's manipulating you. She's bitter. Alone. Don't let her drag you into her misery." Madison's chin lifted. "If being with you means misery, then I choose her kind, because her kind is honest." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the waves. Trevor's face hardened, his mask slipping. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "Maybe," she whispered, "but I'll regret staying more." His jaw clenched. He turned on his heel and stalked back to his car, gravel crunching under his shoes. A moment later, taillights bled red into the night and vanished. Madison sagged against the railing, tears streaking her face. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her shake. "You were brave," I whispered. "Braver than I ever was at your age." I was so blind, she sobbed. "How could I not see what he was doing?" "Because love makes us want to believe," I said gently. "And manipulators build their lives on that wanting." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just cried until the tide swallowed the moonlight, then fell asleep on the couch with her head in my lap. The next morning, Victor called with news the court had granted an emergency order. Trevor was barred from contacting Madison, from approaching the beach house, from touching her accounts. It was only paper, yes, but sometimes paper is enough to build walls higher than any lock. Madison listened silently, then nodded. "It feels like breathing again," she admitted. But even as relief settled in, I knew the story wasn't finished. Trevor would fight, maybe in court, maybe in shadows. Men like him rarely slink away without a final strike. That night I stood on the porch watching the tide. The ocean glimmered with secrets just as it always had. Only now, instead of hiding from them, I was ready to face them head on. And if Trevor came back, if he dared test the strength of a mother protecting her child, he would learn what storms really look like. Because storms don't ask for permission. They rise, they break, and they leave nothing standing that doesn't deserve to be. The beach house grew quiet in the days that followed, but it was the kind of quiet that trembles like the pause before thunder. Madison tried to reclaim pieces of herself, walking at dawn, painting her nails, even opening the box of seashells she'd collected as a girl, but the shadow of Trevor lingered like smoke on curtains. I could see it in the way her hand twitched every time her phone buzzed and how she double-checked the locks each night. On the fourth morning, a letter arrived, slipped through the slot without a stamp. No envelope, just a folded sheet with words scrawled in red ink. "You can't hide her from me." I called Victor immediately. He pressed the district attorney's office for faster action, reminding them of Trevor's grandfather, of the pattern repeating itself. They promised to escalate, but I could hear in their tone the weary caution of people used to waiting until damage was visible. That evening I made a decision. "Madison," I said, pouring tea into the chipped mug Frank once favored, "we can't live in reaction anymore. We have to step forward." She looked at me with tired eyes. How? By telling the truth louder than his lies. The next day, with Victor's guidance, we filed public motions attaching every document, every piece of evidence of Trevor's schemes. Madison insisted on signing her own affidavit, her hand shaking but her words sharp. He used me. He used others. I will not let him continue. The local paper picked up the story within 48 hours. Promising entrepreneur, under investigation for fraud. The headline read, but inside, buried in column inches, was the real story, how Trevor Morrison had followed the path of his grandfather, spinning illusions, until women were left bankrupt alone or silenced. Madison read it aloud on the porch, her voice trembling. When she finished, she looked at me as though seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "You were right to fight," she whispered, "even when I hated you for it." I reached for her hand. "I wasn't fighting you, sweetheart. I was fighting for you." The following week brought storms, rain lashing the windows, waves pounding against the dunes. Trevor didn't appear, but his lawyer sent a venomous letter, claims of defamation, threats of countersuits. Victor laughed bitterly when he read it. The louder they scream, the closer you are to winning. And then, just when the rain cleared, Madison received an envelope in the mail. This one carried a stamp, a return address, and a thick stack of papers inside a petition for annulment signed by Trevor himself. Along with it, a scribbled note. "You're not worth the fight." Madison stared at it for a long moment, then tore it in half. "He's wrong," she said, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "I am worth it, just not to him. Just—" That night, we sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip into the horizon. The ocean shimmered gold, and for once its endlessness felt like promise rather than threat. "Mom," she said quietly, "do you think I'll ever love again?" I squeezed her hand. "Yes. But next time, it will be love that doesn't make you smaller. Love that doesn't cost you yourself." She nodded, tears glistening, but they were different tears, lighter, freer, the kind that wash wounds clean. As the stars pricked the sky, I thought of Trevor's grandfather, of Robert, of all the men who had left cracks in our lives. But I also thought of the house that still stood, the daughter who still breathed beside me, the strength that had bloomed out of betrayal. This was not the ending Trevor wanted, but it was the one we chose. And to those listening now, let me tell you, betrayal can shatter you, yes, but it can also carve you open to a truth you never knew you carried. Family wounds run deep, but they do not define you. What defines you is how you rise, whether you stay buried in silence or stand trembling but tall in the storm. I lost a daughter once to lies, but I gained her back through truth. And that, in the end, is worth more than any beach house, any marriage, any illusion of peace. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that reveal the strength inside betrayal. And tell me in the comments, have you ever found courage in the middle of heartbreak? I'd love to hear your story.